Last week, we prayed for my sister-in-law, Therese. She's not technically my sister-in-law. She is my brother-in-law's sister, but we're family. Therese was diagnosed with brain cancer. And when the doctor told her and her husband the news, Therese asked him, "Can you give me 3 years?" And the doctor said, "I have a patient who is surviving after 20 years. And when they left, her husband asked her, "Honey, why did you only ask for 3 years?" And she said, "Because you and the boys are not ready yet. But you will be in 3 years." That was 3 years ago. Therese is in her final moments of life, and her family is ready. You know, we hear a lot about bucket lists. And when people talk about their bucket lists, they're usually talking about books that they want to read or things they want to experience, like jumping out of an airplane, or places they want to visit, like the Grand Canyon or Maui. Therese had a bucket list. And her bucket list was simply to prepare her husband and children, not just for her death, but for the fulfillment of God's promise that will come as a result of her death. 3 years doesn't sound like a whole lot of time to do that, but that's all Jesus had. Jesus had 3 years in ministry to prepare his apostles for not just the scandal of the cross, but for the fulfillment of the promises that will come as a result of it. Jesus had a bucket list too. Jesus, we have talked about, has been making his way to Jerusalem. Last week, he was in Jericho. This week, he's in Jerusalem. He is in Jerusalem, and he's in his final days. He has been in public ministry now for 3 years, and it is coming to an end. And he has this great conversation with the Sadducees about resurrection. It's part of his bucket list is to get people prepared for what that means. Because it's not just a simple resuscitation. Lazarus was not resurrected from the tomb. Lazarus was resuscitated from the tomb. Because when Lazarus came out of the tomb, Lazarus still had all of the needs that every human being has. He still felt hungry. He still felt sad. He still mourned the loss of people. It still hurt when he stubbed his toe. Lazarus had all of the needs that every human person has after he was resuscitated from the tomb. But in the resurrection, none of that matters. St. Paul says that our God is faithful. Our God is faithful to all of his promises, and so all of his promises will be met. The problem is that while we are in this body, we can only catch glimpses of those promises. God promises justice, and we catch glimpses of the divine justice that is promised. God promises mercy, and we catch a glimpse of that divine mercy. God promises us hope. God promises us love. God promises us joy. God promises us all these things, and in this life we can catch glimpses of them. But it is in the next life where they are fully realized. God is faithful to his promises. But God is not bound by the limits of time. The problem is that we tend to be so rooted in this world that we miss those glimpses. We cannot receive all that God has promised just simply because we are not ready. We're not ready because we have not prepared. God is faithful to all of his promises. We don't receive because we're not ready to receive. I wonder. Everybody's life is numbered. Everybody's days is numbered. Everybody at some point is going to face the cross. Everybody at some point is going to face passing over from this world to the next. Are you ready? What's on your bucket list? Our bucket lists tend to just keep us rooted here. But it ought to prepare us to receive the fullness of God's promises. We don't receive the fullness of God's promise of mercy because we hang on to past hurts and past failures. Let's add that to our bucket list. We don't experience God's great peace because we become so saturated with angst and anxiety over the things of this world. Let's add that to our bucket list. We don't experience God's great justice, his right relationships, because we refuse to forgive and we refuse to receive forgiveness. Let's add that to our bucket list. Our days are numbered. We don't know what those numbers are. But if you think that that is a bleak prospect, if you think that this is something that is sad, then you are not yet ready to receive the fullness of God's promises. What God promises us is the fullness of joy, the fullness of peace, the fullness of love. We cannot receive that fully in this body, but we can catch glimpses of it. Let's catch the glimpses. Every glimpse of God's promise that we catch in this world prepares us for the next world. It prepares us to receive the fullness. Jesus did not want to just prepare his apostles for the coming cross. He wanted them to be ready for the coming Spirit. He wanted them to be ready for the coming of God's promise. He wanted them to be ready to be fully integrated in the kingdom of God. And in the kingdom of God, nothing is held back. In the kingdom of God, nothing is denied. In the kingdom of God, nothing is needed. We are fully healed. We are fully whole. We are fully human. We are fully alive. Let's live our life every day preparing for that moment. It is a glorious moment. Let's live our life every day catching glimpses and giving glimpses of the promises of God. If that day came tomorrow, would you be ready for it? If the day came tomorrow or in the next 3 years for you to enter into immortality, are you ready to receive what God has promised? I wonder, what's on your bucket list? Let's update it.